It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of March 22nd, 2002. We've got three movies here, two new films and one classic, but the one classic, this particular re-release was extremely controversial, and we will get to that one after we get to the first movie here, the biggest new release of the weekend, and that is Guillermo del Toro taking over the helm of the sequel to Blade, which is simply known as Blade 2.
On March 22nd, only he can lead his old enemy.
They're no longer top of the food chain.
Our forces are ready to fight.
You've taken orders from me to fight a new breed of terror. Dave Walker. Wesley Snipes. You do not know who you are. Blade 2. Rated R. Starts Friday, March 22nd.
It all starts at 8/7 Central, Fox Friday. I'm sorry, that's Joe Cipriano, who's a really good voiceover announcer, actually, he's doing the voiceover for all three of the movies that we have here, so this episode should really be called the Joe Cipriano episode, because his name's all over the place, but I'm sorry, his voice is all over the place, I should say, but I'm sorry. As cool of a voice as that guy has, every time he says it in that way, I keep thinking back to the days when he was voicing the Fox promos, and that's the way he would usually do the promos on there. It's just like, here's the schedule, and then he's like, at 8/7 Central, Fox Sunday. I feel like with a lot of movies that he's done voiceovers for, you could put that, you would swear that they were things on the Fox schedule that night. I mean, Resident Evil had a TV spot last week that was very similar to a Fox promo, really, when you look at it, but I don't know, I thought that was kind of amusing. But Blade 2, let's talk about Blade 2, because this is the sequel to the original Blade from 1998. Wesley Snipes is in this. This is directed by Guillermo del Toro and written by David S. Goyer, and in this sequel you have Blade, once again played by Snipes, in his continuing effort to protect humans from vampires, finding himself in a fierce battle against a group of mutant vampires who seek to commit global genocide of both vampire and human races. Blade and his human allies are coerced into joining forces with a special elite group of vampires. You also have Chris Christopherson returning from the first movie. Ron Perlman joins the cast in this one, and also Lenora Valera from Arrested Development. Norman Reedus, who would later go on to The Walking Dead. Luke Goss is in this as well. Thomas Kretschum, who you would later see in King Kong. Just a really solid cast overall here, and the first real wide approach for Guillermo del Toro to get his name out there, because of course he would follow this up with Hellboy and then Children of Men. No, he didn't follow it up with Children of Men. That's Alfonso Cuarón, but he went on to become a very prolific director after this movie came out. It was a big hit overall. It actually made more money than the first film did. And rightfully so, because, well, Blade 2 is a much better movie than the first Blade was. Not to say that the first Blade movie was bad and all, but this does what a really good sequel should do. It should up the ante. It should show off more of the storyline, expand the universe, and actually have a really compelling storyline you can follow. And I think this movie does a very good job of handling that. The movie is very, very well made. Wesley Snipes really shows that he was pretty much made to star in this role, and he really is the main thing that's keeping the movie afloat. And it's a shame that Blade Trinity ended it kind of on a sour note, but we'll eventually get to that one down the road. But Blade 2 was really a great film that really took more chances. It upped the ante from the first film. The visuals, I think, look a lot better. The action sequences overall are very good. There's a lot of great atmospheric aspects to it that Guillermo del Toro brings to the table. I mean, this is the guy that had just done The Devil's Backbone in the fall, and it's just a really damn good movie. I mean, it's a really fun film. You get so invested in what's going on with everyone in this, and you get invested in the spectacle, the visual aspects of the film. I mean, it's a really solid film that is definitely a step above the original film in particular. It has a lot of things about it that make it stand out more than the first film does. It's definitely the best of the Blade movies, and it's not even close by comparison. I mean, the first Blade movie is great. The second one, I think, is the topper, and then Blade Trinity kind of ends on a sour note. But again, we'll delve into that one in a couple years when we get to Blade Trinity, but Blade 2 is a really good film. I highly recommend it. And even if you weren't as keen on the first film as most people were, you can definitely find a lot to appreciate with Blade 2. And you also get to see a sneak preview of what Guillermo del Toro would eventually bring to the table with many of his other films he would make after this film. Not much more to say, man. Blade 2 really is a better better movie than the first Blade is. I think it is definitely the best of the Blade movies by a large comparison, and one you should definitely check out. So that's Blade 2. Now let's go ahead and get into controversy time. Let's take a look at Steven Spielberg's E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial, back in theaters for its 20th anniversary. with its infamous controversial additions that they add to the film.
In March 2002, Steven Spielberg's masterpiece returns to theaters everywhere. What's he doing? Phone home. With enhanced visual effects, never-before-seen footage, and a digitally remastered soundtrack, Steven Spielberg presents the 20th anniversary of E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial.
So yeah, we finally get to talk about this, and Steven Spielberg is usually very careful with how he remasters his movies, and it was mostly because of what happened with E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. I don't think I need to say too much more about this movie, which I've already talked about. Is one of my favorite films of all time. It's still my favorite film of Steven Spielberg's. It's still very much in the top 15 of my favorite films of all time. But back then, in 2002, when they announced that this was going to come out for the film's 25th anniversary, it was announced that the movie was heading back into theaters with not only a new digitally remastered audio track, but enhanced visual effects and never-before-seen footage. And they were advertising this like crazy. I remember this being advertised back in 2002. There was like a great Toys R Us commercial with Jeffrey the Giraffe and E.T. There was a lot of specials on TV promoting this. NBC had a special where they reunited the entire cast and they talked about their memories of making the film. And, it got everybody so excited to see this on the big screen again. And I was disappointed that I never got to see it in theaters because I would have loved to have seen it. And this was before I even knew about the controversial things they did to it. So much so that I didn't hear too much about it until South Park went ahead and did a ton of parodies of it, of the E.T. re-release in one of their episodes when they had it in the summertime, basically making fun of the fact that they had, the guns were replaced by walkie-talkies, and, they parody the E.T. trailer, and then they followed up with, coming this summer, it's the movie that changed America, Saving Private Ryan, the re-release, with all the guns replaced by walkie-talkies, and all the guns were replaced with walkie-talkies during the opening scene where they're going at each other, and it's just people dying from walkie-talkies shooting them, and just like, it runs throughout the course of the episode, and, South Park has taken a lot of jabs at Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, especially with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which that's one of the few times I really do not agree with South Park on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It's not that bad of a movie, but this episode in particular was incredibly funny. I loved it, and it didn't have, the E.T. re-release didn't have much of an impact on me because I had yet to see the new effects, so finally, the movie came out on DVD during the holiday season. I got it for Christmas. I finally sat down and watched the new version. And again, I didn't feel anything differently except that I felt the new cut didn't need the extra footage. The effects do bother me a little bit. Didn't bother me too. I should say that I scratched that. The effects didn't really bother me too much. Neither did the audio. So for the longest time, I just kind of let it slide and just let it be, kind of the thing that kind of just something that was just like, it's not a big deal for me. It wasn't until I finally got to the Blu-ray release in 2012 where you had the original cut of the movie remastered, and I'll tell you what, it may have taken 10 years to finally see what everyone was talking about because, man, there's definitely a lot of differences between the first DVD release and the newer Blu-ray release, and it definitely shows if you compare the two. I mean, it basically goes without saying, watching the 2002 cut at age 23 was much different than me watching it at age 13, so I could see the notable differences, but man, Spielberg messed up pretty badly here. I mean, the visual effects, the changing of them, it's not a bad idea. E.T. doesn't look that bad in CG, but at the same time, there's definitely a major difference between CG and practical. I mean, you can look at so many examples here, like the E.T. getting drunk, which was one of the great scenes in the movie where E.T. gets drunk and uses the speak and spell, and for some reason he and Elliot are connected, so Elliot's in class and he looks like he's drunk. When you look at the original cut and then you look at the CG version, practical effects just work better in that scenario because of the cleaner, because then having the cleaner CG effects, like I said, because E.T. looks fine in CG, but the practical effects just work better in those cases because in those scenes you could tell that he's right there in the original version, unlike in the 2002 version. Now, there's definitely a lot of other things in the re-release that I can easily bring up, but you can, like, in particular, there's a couple of shots in the 2002 cut where they are pretty interesting. The one that sticks out to me the most is that where there's a scene where E.T. is running to the spaceship and is flying away, and I thought that was actually a really good use of the updated CG. It's actually one of the few things from this particular version that I liked. It felt that held up better in the original version. Not the original version was bad in particular, but it just looks like it looks weirder than him running away. I like the idea of E.T. running, trying to reach the ship, even though it's going up in the air, and I think that's more effective with him than just him standing in the trees, looking at it as it flies away. Like he looks like he's not even there in that particular scene in particular. But I like what they did with the re-release. I thought that was one of the cooler things I actually liked about that one. But then you got to talk about the big thing that everyone was talking about, the guns being replaced by walkie-talkies. And let's be honest, there's no way to defend this decision. Of all the decisions that Spielberg has made in his entire career, this has to be the dumbest decision he's ever done. And I get it, 9/11 had just happened a couple months ago, and you wanted to be a little more politically correct, but at the same time, there's nothing threatening about walkie-talkies there than there are with guns literally about to kill this thing. I mean, where's the tension from the walkie-talkie? I mean, you better stop or I'll call in somebody. Like, if you watch the original film, the reason why that scene does not work with the walkie-talkies is because you could see Ellie and the Kier's fear in their eyes when they see these guns. Like, they're fearful for their lives, and they're likely going to die until E.T. is able to get him and the rest of the kids up in the air before they can get to him. That's a more powerful scene than watching the kids getting scared of fucking walkie-talkies. I mean, it's the worst thing that you could have done, and everybody knew it was a mistake. And, yeah, Spielberg was certainly... He thought certain shots were not really that great, so he had Industrial Light and Magic come in to modify the shots, you know, because he did it with Star Wars, with the original... George Lucas did it with the Star Wars movies, and nobody really seemed to be bothered by it. They actually added scenes in particular where... Like, there was a scene where E.T. takes a bath, and Gertie tells Mary that Elliot went to the forest on Halloween. Mary's dialogue during the off-screen argument with Michael about his Halloween costume were altered to replace the word terrorist and hippie. That was another thing that South Park made fun of. It's funny because Spielberg didn't even add the scene that features Harrison Ford in it as a cameo, feeling that they reshaped the film too drastically. Which is funny because Harrison Ford's appearance is too much for him, but adding walkie-talkies instead of guns and replacing the words terrorist and hippie was too much for them. And yeah, like it just really, you could just tell that Spielberg knew he messed up. And unlike George Lucas, where he basically is refusing to release the original cuts of Star Wars, Spielberg publicly disavowed the 20th anniversary cut, and that's why on the Blu-ray that came out, the first one in 2012, we eventually got the regular version of the film. And I'm glad that he came around to it. It's like, you got to give Steven Spielberg a lot more credit for that than somebody like George Lucas, who just refuses to release the 20, you know, he refuses to release the original Star Wars cuts. I mean, everyone would love to see them. Everyone really would like to watch those movies again the way they were meant to be seen, but instead of having to go find them on bootlegs. I mean, I have a bootleg Blu-ray of the specialized editions that I got at a Comic-Con a couple years ago. And it's because nobody really wants it. It's because George Lucas doesn't want to do it, because he and David Zaslav are apparently very, very pitty. There's no other way to say it, but I am glad that Steven Spielberg did eventually come around to it. And yeah, the E.T. 20th anniversary cut is really bad. There are a few things about it that I do kind of like, including a couple newer shots that actually look better in the original film. Mainly early on in the movie, but it's definitely an inferior cut to an already perfect movie that could have had some merit to it, but gets so messed up because of the changes made. I mean, I've talked about it before. I just did a video not too long ago on the Reviewing Network Talks About with this film. It's still one of my favorite movies of all time. It's still my favorite Steven Spielberg movie, and I really love this movie so much. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this, not only because of this movie coming out, was that when I talked about it over on the website, I actually did a blog talking about this. Freeform was playing it on TV during Thanksgiving of 2020, and it made me really want to talk about it, because the Freeform version that they played on TV as of late is the regular version. The only reason to look for a copy of the 2002 film is so you could easily compare the two versions and realize that, yeah, the original version's much better. There's no real reason to say that you should watch the 2002 version and expect a much better film, because you simply will not. But it's just an interesting little piece of history that Steven Spielberg himself has disavowed and said that, hey, I'm not going to do this again. And I'm glad to see that he didn't do that. I mean, like, he's at least acknowledging his mistakes, which, unlike some people, that actually is really cool of him. And that's why I could give a lot of more respect to Steven Spielberg than I would to somebody like George Lucas. And yeah, so not much more to say about this particular version. I mean, E.T., the classic original version, is far superior than this particular version. If this eventually gets re-released in the theaters one day, I would like to see it again on the big screen. Hopefully, it will still be the original version. But yeah, I dodged a bullet when we didn't get to go see this in theaters in 2002. It's funny because not a year later on ABC, they actually played the 20th anniversary version. And I gotta say this, like, that particular version of E.T. that they played on TV then, you would have thought that would have been the first time E.T. was ever on television, because they set that up as, like, a major television event. Like, it starts off with the trailer for the 20th anniversary, and then it follows that up with a little segment from My Wife and Kids, where Damon Wayans' young daughter is scared of E.T., and, like, they were setting this up as, like, this big event. Like, even though E.T. had been on television several times in the over 10 years since the first time it aired on TV, it's just like, wow. It's just like I miss those days when, like, movies on television used to be like big events like that. And sadly, because TV networks think that it's just better to make cheap reality shows, stupid reality shows, instead of actually showing movies, those ways will never be the same again. It just made me realize how much I miss old television like that, old broadcast TV like that. But wanted to bring that up there. So that's probably the longest I've ever talked about a movie on this particular show, but E.T.'s 20th anniversary has a lot of interesting things to say about it, nevertheless. But so let's go ahead and wrap the show up by taking a look at our last movie that we have here, and that is the comedy Sorority Boys.
Your fraternity forced you to join a sorority.
Yeah, very funny.
Would you?
Oh my god.
If you had to get sensitive,
Let's share.
should you?
Oh, I'm addicted to porn. Pillow fight!
Okay, I think we just need to stop right there. I think you get the gist of what this movie is. A group of college boys who are dressed up as girls in order to prove their innocence for a crime they didn't commit from a fraternity. The trailer basically says it. If your fraternity is being forcing you to join a sorority, and you've got Barry Watson from Seventh Heaven, Michael Rosenbaum from Smallville, and Harlan Williams, because those three guys clearly are people that should be in college. And yeah, the rest of that trailer is pretty much jokes that you pretty much expect to come. And the sad thing about this whole thing is that this is directed by one of the guys who wrote for The Simpsons, and not the newer seasons of The Simpsons, the classic seasons of The Simpsons, the first 4 seasons of the show, Wally Wolodarski. And yeah, talk about a really, really bad film to direct on. I mean, luckily he's made much better choices since then, doing stuff like The Oblongs and being in a lot of Wes Anderson films. He wrote the critically underrated films The Rocker, Monsters vs. Aliens. I mean, he's done a lot of better stuff than this film, and it's just a terrible movie. It's trying to be the Tootsie or Mrs. Doubtfire for the college circuit, and you know which direction it's going to go. You know exactly where they're going to take you. You know it's going to be that kind of a film that's trying to be the new Animal House. It even has 2 people from Animal House in it, Stephen Furst and John Vernon, and it's just like, why are you guys here, man? Like, what are you guys doing in this movie? What is anybody doing in this movie? And like I said, Barry Watson, Michael Rosenbaum, Harlan Williams. Harlan Williams was 40 years old when this movie came out. Michael Rosenbaum was 30. And Barry Watson was like was closing in on 28 years old when this came out. And these guys are supposed to be in college. Like, that really should tell you everything that's wrong with the movie there. But the jokes aren't funny. I mean, maybe if Wally Wolodarski actually had a hand in the script, maybe he could have made it much funnier than it actually is. But no. Everything about this movie is just bad. Like, you know how it's going to work out. The girls are going to find out what the boys are actually doing. There's going to be this third act breakup. Everything's going to go to pieces, and you're going to be bored by hell of it because you know exactly what the hell they're doing in this particular situation here. And it's like, what is the point? What is the reason why I'm here? Like, why am I watching this? Like, nothing about this makes any sense whatsoever, and everybody involved has much more talent and deserves a much better movie than this. This is a terrible film, unfunny, nothing about it works whatsoever. You can pretty much predict everything that's going to happen. It's a bad movie. It's a really, really bad movie, and sadly, this is not the worst cross-dressing movie we get in 2002. Wait until we get to Joanna Man, because that'll make this movie look like Tootsie by comparison. This will make this movie look like the equivalent to something like either Tootsie, Mrs. Doubtfire, or Some Like It Hot. I mean, Joanna Man is that bad of a movie, but we're not quite there yet. We still have a couple months to go before that. But, yeah, avoid Sorority Boys like the plague, please. And so on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. We'll wrap March off on the next episode with Jodie Foster and David Fincher's Panic Room, also with Kristen Stewart in one of her early film roles. Dennis Quaid stars in the latest Disney sports film, The Rookie. Nickelodeon has a new film with Jonathan Frakes, the director of Star Trek First Contact, on it, Clock Stoppers. And Robin Williams and Edward Norton star in a new film directed by Danny DeVito, Death to Smoochie. So we'll take a look at those 4 movies on the next episode. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the plays on the next page, check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. So, with that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.